Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to join you today for this conference on artificial intelligence for information accessibility. And I want to take the opportunity of this short talk to specifically address the dimensions of gender inclusion in the AI economy, which I think is really relevant and connected to the topics discussed in this conference. First, I want to spend a little bit of time defining what we mean by the digital economy. And there's a number of new trends in digitization and innovation. Of course, we have artificial intelligence, which has a number of subfields. Generative AI was really the subfield in artificial intelligence that raised public awareness of this powerful suite of tools. But we also have predictive analytics, which has been used for many years in a variety of domains to make predictions. In my case, as a data scientist, we were predicting humanitarian crisis or needs during humanitarian crises, for example. There's robotics, autonomous agents, and we also see the integration of AI into various other digital products. But these are not the only areas where the importance of understanding gender equality and the gender inclusion are important. We have an increase in mobile health, which can be very beneficial for women who, particularly in places where it's more difficult for them to leave their homes or leave their villages. We have the rise of e-commerce, which has actually been extremely interesting for many women as small business owners. If we could think about it in terms of participation in the labor force, women have a higher percentage of participation in smaller and medium-sized enterprises than larger enterprises. And so e-commerce has allowed women who are sole business owners or who work in small businesses to be able to access much larger markets than they had been able to in the past. We have the question of smart cities. So increasingly, there's an exploration around the world of trying to increase the efficiency of cities by increasing their digitization and data collection around that. There's a number of issues related to that, notably related to privacy, and gender dimensions of that are quite important. And there's a number of sectoral tech developments which may or may not use AI, such as agricultural technology, educational technology, etc. So in my research, I look at 4 different areas of risk and opportunity for digitization and gender equality. The first is discrimination. So this happens when the output of an AI system, for example, is different from one group to another, such as for men than for women. So the error rate might be greater for women, and that might affect whether or not they can get a loan, whether or not they can get a job, whether or not they're allowed to pass through a border, for example. Stereotype is when content created makes women seem inferior or sexualized. So interestingly enough, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, highlights in Article 5 how stereotyping is actually contravenes human rights and women's rights in particular. And we see a lot of stereotypical content being produced in generative AI. Exclusion is when women are unable to participate fully in digital development due to a lack of resources, childcare, systemic reasons, and venture capital. And the interesting statistic is that in North America and Europe, only 2 or 3% of venture capital will go to women-owned startups. And so that is a clear metric of the level of exclusion at the moment in the digital economy of women. And then we have the question of insecurity, where tools developed might threaten the security of women. For example, certain ride-sharing applications like Uber or Gojek in Indonesia have had to be redeveloped with the consideration of women's security in mind. So at the moment, what is the current state of AI and gender governance, which is it critical to be able to address some of these important challenges? So there have been gender-sensitive AI policy reports. There's one that my team at UNU wrote for Southeast Asia, for example. There is a gender module included in UNESCO's recommendation on the ethics of AI, which was adopted and signed by all of UNESCO's member states very recently. And however, generally, as we move towards the global governance of AI, and this week at the General Assembly at the UN has been critical in making some strides towards that, we still find that the linkages between gender equality and digital development are still weak, and that we focus a lot of our attention on bridging the digital divide, so making sure that women have access to the internet and receive the skills to participate in AI development. But there's still a lot of other issues, notably the ones that I mentioned, that the technologies themselves can increase gender inequality, and that the barriers to participation can be quite systemic. Lack of access to financing, for example, is really critical in that. So what is the cost of ignoring gender equality in digitization? So the first cost is that the growth of AI adoption globally could contribute to losses in gender equality, particularly if discrimination and stereotyping are not addressed. The second is that exclusion could mean a loss of opportunity to harness AI tools for gender equality, for example, in health, safety, e-commerce, and education. And the third cost would be that exclusion could also mean loss of socioeconomic opportunity for women wishing to participate in the new AI economic sector. So it's a very lucrative and dynamic sector, and it's really important for the socioeconomic empowerment of women that they have access to this economic sector through a broad range of AI skills. And one organization that we've partnered with in the past is called Connected Women in the Philippines. And what they do is that they train thousands of women around the world in AI skills, which they can then perform their duties in their homes virtually and make interesting money and participate in developing AI in a very interesting way. So what might be some pathways for the promotion of gender equality in digitization and innovation for policymakers? So this is kind of the question. We've raised some of the issues, so what could potentially be some of the solutions in relation to this? So the first one is the development of an AI Societal Impacts Committee or task force in governments. So this we see increasingly. Notably, we're seeing the development of AI safety institutes around the world. So I think it's really important to think about these national safety institutes and whether or not they could include a function for the consideration of gender equality. Then we have normative guideline creation. So we still, I think, are still missing the creation of a gender and AI guideline, which could support both private and public sector projects in developing gender-safe products. We, having spoken to many private sector companies globally and policymakers, there's still a lack of understanding of really what the dynamics are. And often we're still, as I mentioned, looking at maybe having more women developers or maybe increasing the amount of women learning computer science, which is critical, but it's not the only way to address some of these gender equality issues. We can work on AI safety standards across different regions in the AI lifecycle, in gender disaggregated data sets, testing and monitoring of AI systems. And finally, we can invest in women AI, in AI networks, and women in other STEM fields, develop pipelines through training and upskilling, supporting women-led AI companies, and supporting women's participation in AI policymaking, which is also critical because this is the decision-making around AI trends, opportunities, and risks. So I will end here. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm very happy to discuss anytime.